Segment 1, The Discovery. The cold had settled over the northern Wyoming ridge long before dusk, pressing down like an iron weight on everything it touched. It was the kind of winter cold that didn't simply sting an exposed skin but sank deeper, into joints and bones, slowing a man's movements and making every breath feel like swallowing shards of glass. The year was 1878, and the land stretched out in endless white, unforgiving, and beautiful in equal measure. Nathan Grayson moved through the snow with the steady, practiced rhythm of a man who had learned to respect the wilderness without fearing it. At 39 years old, his face bore the weathered lines of someone who had seen more than most men twice his age. His beard, dark brown streaked with early gray, offered some protection against the biting wind. His eyes, a pale blue that seemed to mirror the winter sky itself, scanned the terrain with the automatic vigilance of someone who had once made his living by noticing what others missed. Behind him, struggling slightly in the deeper drifts, came Marcus. The boy was 12 years old, thin but wiry, with sandy brown hair that stuck out from beneath his wool cap. His cheeks were flushed red from exertion and cold, and his breath came in visible puffs that hung in the frigid air before dissipating. He carried a bundle of steel traps over one shoulder, their metal frames clinking softly with each step. Nathan paused at the edge of a ravine where they had set their last trap 3 days prior. He knelt down, brushing away fresh snow to reveal the mechanism beneath. The trap was empty, undisturbed. Good craftsmanship meant the difference between a meal and an empty stomach out here. He reset it carefully, his thick gloves making the work awkward but necessary. Bare hands in this weather meant frostbite in minutes. Marcus watched closely, as he always did. The boy had been with Nathan for 6 months now, ever since cholera had swept through the settlement to the east and taken both his parents within a week of each other. Thomas had been Nathan's friend from the Army days. They had served together, fought together, and Thomas had once saved Nathan's life during a skirmish with raiders near the Black Hills. When word reached Nathan about Thomas and his wife succumbing to the fever, he had ridden 2 days to bring Marcus back to the cabin. It was the least he could do. More than that, it was the right thing to do. The boy needed a home. Nathan needed purpose beyond the hollow routine of trapping and surviving. Marcus cleared his throat. The wind had picked up, and the sky to the north had taken on an ominous gray quality that Nathan recognized immediately. "Mr. Grayson," the boy said, his voice carrying the uncertain waver of someone still adjusting to the wilderness. "Storm's coming, isn't it?" Nathan glanced at the horizon, then back at the trap he had just secured. "Look at those clouds, Marcus. See how they're flat on the bottom, dark like old iron? When clouds look like that this time of year, we're in for 3 days of heavy snow. Maybe more. Shouldn't we head back now then?" Nathan stood, dusting snow from his knees. "Smart thinking. But first I want you to tell me what you see here." He gestured at the trap in the surrounding area. Marcus stepped closer, squinting at the ground. This was how Nathan taught him, not through lectures, but through observation and experience. The boy studied the placement of the trap, the way Nathan had arranged small branches around it to funnel an animal's path, the careful concealment of the chain. "You put it where the tracks are heaviest," Marcus said slowly, "and you use the pine branches to make it look natural." "Good, what else?" The boy thought for a moment. "You didn't put it right into the middle of the path. You put it to the side, where an animal would step if it was being cautious." Nathan felt a flicker of satisfaction. The boy was learning. "That's right. A trap in the obvious spot catches nothing. You have to think like what you're hunting, understand its fear, its caution. Then you position yourself one step ahead of that thinking." They gathered their equipment and began the walk back toward the cabin. The temperature had dropped noticeably in just the past hour. Nathan could feel it in the way the snow crunched differently under his boots, drier and more brittle. The storm would hit before nightfall. As they walked, Marcus asked, "Why'd you build the cabin so big if it's just you living there?" The question caught Nathan off guard, though he didn't show it. The cabin was indeed larger than necessary for a single man. It had 2 rooms, not one, a hearth big enough to heat a family, shelves that still held preserves and supplies meant for more than one person. "Built it with help," Nathan said after a moment. "Seemed like the right size at the time." Marcus seemed to sense there was more to the story but didn't press. The boy had developed an instinct for when to ask questions and when to let silence speak. They continued in companionable quiet, the only sounds the crunch of their footsteps and the whisper of wind through the pine trees. Nathan's thoughts drifted, as they often did out here, to the past, to choices made and paths not taken, to the uniform he had worn and the orders he had followed until the day he could not follow them anymore. The memories were always there, lurking at the edges of his consciousness like wolves at the perimeter of a campfire's light. Blue Hawk Canyon, the faces of families torn apart, the sound of a woman crying for her child. The moment he had turned his back on his commanding officer and walked away from everything he had known. That had been 5 years ago. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. They were within sight of the cabin when Nathan heard it. A sound so faint that at first he thought he had imagined it. He stopped abruptly, holding up one hand. Marcus froze behind him. "What is it?" the boy whispered. Nathan tilted his head, filtering out the wind, listening with the focused intensity that had once made him one of the Army's most effective scouts. There, again, a sound that didn't belong. Not an animal, something else. "Stay close," he said quietly, and moved toward the source. They found her near the creek bed, half buried in a drift of snow that had accumulated against a fallen log. At first, Nathan thought it might be a discarded hide or a bundle of furs left by another trapper. But as they approached, the shape resolved into something that made his chest tighten with immediate recognition and something darker. Guilt, perhaps, or the echo of old sins. A woman lay curled on her side, barely conscious. Her skin, which would have been a warm bronze in health, had taken on an ashen, grayish quality. Her long black hair was matted with ice and snow. She wore a deerskin dress, traditional Apache style, but it was torn badly across the shoulder and down the front, exposing bruised skin beneath. Her lips were blue. Her breathing was so shallow it was almost imperceptible. Marcus made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a cry. "Mr. Grayson, she's dying!" Nathan stood frozen for 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. His mind processed everything at once: the style of her dress, the traditional beadwork visible despite the damage, the way her hair was worn. Apache. She was Apache. The last people he had hunted. The faces he saw in his worst dreams. His first instinct, the one that rose from the part of him that still carried shame like a physical weight, was to consider walking away. She was likely already too far gone. Hypothermia. This severe rarely left survivors. If he tried to help and failed, it would be just one more death he couldn't prevent. And if word got out that he was harboring an Apache woman, the complications could be as severe. But even as these thoughts formed, he was already moving forward, because standing beside him was Marcus. The boy was watching him with what it burned frightened eyes. Not just frightened for the woman, but watching to see what Nathan would do. What kind of man Nathan was. And Nathan realized in that moment that his answer to this situation would teach Marcus more than 1,000 lessons about tracking or trapping ever could. "Marcus," he said, his voice steady and commanding, "take off your scarf. We need to wrap her extremities." The boy obeyed instantly, fumbling with cold fingers to unwrap the wool from around his neck. Nathan was already kneeling beside the woman, checking her pulse. It was there, but faint and irregular. 12 beats in 15 seconds. Severe hypothermia. Stage 2, possibly stage 3. He had seen this before during winter campaigns. If they didn't act fast, she would slip into unconsciousness and never wake. He pulled off his own coat, the heavy sheepskin that had been keeping him warm, and wrapped it around her torso. "The scarf on her feet and hands," he instructed Marcus. "Don't rub the skin. That can cause damage to frozen tissue. Just wrap and insulate." "Why not give her whiskey?" Marcus asked as he worked. "I thought that warms people up." "Common mistake," Nathan said, carefully sliding one arm under the woman's shoulders and the other beneath her knees. "Alcohol dilates blood vessels, pushes warm blood from the core to the extremities. Feels like it warms you, but actually lowers core temperature faster. She'd die quicker." He lifted her, surprised by how light she was. Too light. She had probably gone days without proper food. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel the faint tremors that occasionally ran through her body. That was good. Shivering meant her body was still trying to generate heat. When the shivering stopped, That's when people died. Marcus grabbed the bundle of traps and Nathan's rifle, struggling under the weight but determined. They moved as quickly as the snow allowed, Nathan setting the pace. Every minute counted now. The woman stirred slightly in his arms, her cracked lips moving. A sound came out, barely more than an exhaled breath, but Nathan caught it. English, heavily accented but clear enough. "Frostbite," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "Need warm." "You'll get warm," he said, not sure if she could hear or understand him. "Just hold on." The cabin appeared through the increasing snow. Nathan had built it 5 years ago with his sister Sarah's help, choosing this location specifically because it was remote enough that he wouldn't have to see other people unless he wanted to. The structure was solid, pine logs chinked with clay and moss, a stone chimney that drew well, and a roof steep enough to shed snow. He kicked the door open and stepped inside, immediately moving to the bed. It dominated one corner of the main room, a large frame built from lodgepole pine with a rope lattice supporting a corn husk mattress. Sarah's bed, technically, though she had been dead for 2 years now. Nathan laid the woman down as gently as he could. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, dark brown and clouded with confusion and pain, before closing again. He grabbed every blanket he could find, piling them over her, tucking them tight to trap what little body heat she still generated. Marcus had gotten the fire going. The boy was good at that, quick and efficient. Flames began to lick at the dry kindling, and soon the cabin started to fill with warmth and orange light. "Get water heating," Nathan said, moving to the shelves where he kept his medical supplies. They were basic but comprehensive. Army training had been good for something. "Not too hot, lukewarm. We need to warm her slowly." He checked her hands first. The fingers were stiff and discolored, but when he pressed gently on the nail beds, they blanched and then returned to color. Not too late. Frostbite was present, but not severe enough for tissue death yet. Her feet were similar. Painful, certainly, but salvageable. The shoulder wound was concerning. A deep bruise, dark purple, spreading across her collarbone and upper arm. Someone had struck her, and struck her hard. The torn dress told another story, one that made Nathan's jaw tighten with anger. He had seen enough violence against women during his army days to recognize the signs. He worked methodically the way he had been trained. Remove wet clothing, replace with dry. Insulate. Warm gradually. Monitor breathing and pulse. Don't warm too quickly or the sudden rush of cold blood from the extremities back to the heart could cause cardiac arrest. Marcus hovered nearby, holding a cup of lukewarm water. "Is she going to live?" "Don't know yet," Nathan said honestly, "but we're giving her the best chance we can." As the cabin warmed and the woman's shivering became more pronounced, which paradoxically was a good sign, Nathan finally allowed himself to sit back in the wooden chair beside the bed. His hands were shaking slightly, though not from cold. From something else. Recognition. Memory. The weight of past actions pressing down. Marcus noticed. "Mr. Grayson, you all right?" Nathan looked at the boy, then at the woman lying in the bed. An Apache woman who would probably die if left in the snow, but might face equal danger if anyone discovered she was here. He had spent 5 years trying to escape his past, but here it was, quite literally delivered to his doorstep. "Go get more firewood from the shed," he said quietly. "Going to be a long night." After Marcus left, Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and studied the woman's face. Even unconscious and near death, there was something in her features that spoke of strength. The set of her doom, the way her hands, even in sleep, remained partially closed as if ready to fight. He wondered who she was running from, what had happened to tear her dress and bruise her so badly, whether she would thank him for saving her or curse him for it when she learned what he had once been. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm that he had predicted began in earnest. Snow falling in thick sheets that would soon make travel impossible for days. Nathan settled into the chair, preparing for a long vigil. He would watch her through the night, monitoring her breathing, adding wood to the fire, making sure she stayed warm enough, but not too warm. It was the least he could do, perhaps the only thing he could do to balance scales that would never truly be balanced. Marcus returned with an armload of split pine and stacked it neatly by the hearth. The boy looked at Nathan, then at the woman, then back to Nathan with an expression that was far too knowing for someone so young. You saved her, Marcus said simply. We saved her, Nathan corrected. You helped. But you decided to. You could have left her. Nathan didn't answer immediately. How could he explain to a 12-year-old boy the complex web of guilt and redemption that had led to his decision? How could he put into words the feeling that this woman, this stranger, represented something larger than just one life? I did what needed doing, he finally said. That's all. Marcus seemed to accept this. He curled up in his own smaller bed on the other side of the room, wrapped in his blanket, and within minutes was asleep with the easy unconsciousness of youth. Nathan remained awake. Every hour he checked the woman's pulse and breathing. Both were becoming stronger, more regular. Her color was improving marginally. The shivering had finally subsided, which could be either good or bad. He watched carefully for signs of consciousness. Around midnight, as the storm howled against the cabin walls with renewed fury, Nathan's exhaustion caught up with him. His eyes began to close despite his best efforts. His thoughts drifted into that strange space between waking and sleeping, where memories become vivid and immediate. He was back at Blue Hawk Canyon. The year was 1873. Nathan was 34 years old and still wore the uniform of an Army scout. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Morrison, was a hard man who saw Indians not as people but as obstacles to civilization. Nathan had learned not to argue with him, learned to do his job, which was tracking and locating Apache groups that had left the reservation. On that particular cold morning, Nathan had led a column of soldiers to a small canyon where he knew a group of Apache families had taken shelter. He had tracked them for 3 days, following signs that only someone with his training could interpret. A broken branch here, a disturbed stone there, the faint impression of a moccasin in sandy soil. When they arrived, the Apache families had nowhere to run. The soldiers surrounded them efficiently. Nathan watched from his position on a ridge as families were separated. Men were restrained with rope. Women were pulled from children who screamed and fought. An older woman, perhaps 50 years old, held an infant tightly to her chest, while a young soldier tried to take the child. She wouldn't let go. The soldier raised his rifle butt. Nathan had looked away before the blow landed, but he heard it, and he heard the woman's cry. His sister Sarah had been with the column, not as a soldier but as part of a missionary group that sometimes accompanied the army, ostensibly to provide humanitarian aid. Sarah had rushed forward when she saw the woman go down, cradling the infant who had fallen. She looked up at Nathan with eyes full of accusation and heartbreak. "Is this what you do?" she had asked him later, her voice shaking. "Is this what you've become?" He had no answer then. He had tried to justify it. Orders were orders. He was just a tracker. He didn't make policy. But even as he said these things, he knew they were hollow. Cowardice dressed up as duty. 3 days after Blue Hawk Canyon, Lieutenant Morrison had given Nathan another tracking assignment. A family of 4, including 2 small children, had escaped into the mountains. Morrison wanted them found before they could warn other groups or reach sanctuary elsewhere. Nathan had looked at the map, at the direction the family had fled, and then at his commanding officer. He thought of Sarah's face, of the woman with the infant, of all the tracks he had followed that led to suffering. "No," he had said simply. Morrison had stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "What did you say, Scout?" "No, sir, I won't track them." The court-martial had been brief. Dereliction of duty, refusal to obey orders, dishonorable discharge. Nathan had accepted it all without protest. Sarah had been waiting for him outside the stockade when they released him. "I'm proud of you," she had said, taking his arm. Finally. They had come west together, bought the land, built the cabin. Sarah had been his anchor, the one person who believed he could be better than his past. And then, 2 winters ago, a fever had taken her while Nathan was away trying to find a doctor. He had buried her on the ridge overlooking the cabin. Sometimes he still went up there to talk to her, to tell her about Marcus, to ask her what he should do. Nathan jerked awake, disoriented. The fire had burned low. He quickly added more wood, then checked on the woman. Her eyes were closed, but her breathing was steady and strong. Her color had improved significantly. She would live. Probably. Dawnlight was just beginning to filter through the cabin's single window when she stirred. Nathan, who had been dozing in the chair, came fully awake instantly. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the firelight, confused and afraid. She tried to sit up, gasping with pain from her injuries. Her hands immediately went to the blankets, pulling them up to cover the torn front of her dress. Her eyes, now fully open and alert, scanned the room with the rapid assessment of someone expecting danger. When her gaze landed on Nathan, she froze. Recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by terror. She tried to scramble backward but was too weak. Her hand fumbled beneath the pillow where Nathan had placed a small knife. He had left it there deliberately, a gesture of respect. If she woke and felt threatened, she should have the means to defend herself. She found the knife and held it with a shaking hand, pointing it at Nathan while trying to keep the blankets in place with her other arm. Nathan slowly raised both hands, palms out, and leaned back in his chair to put more distance between them. He kept his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "You're safe," he said in English, his voice calm and low. "The storm brought you here. You were dying. I brought you inside." She stared at him, her eyes moving rapidly between his face, his hands, and the rest of the cabin, looking for threats, counting exits, calculating odds. Nathan recognized the behavior. He had done the same thing countless times in uncertain situations. "Where am I?" she asked. Her English was accented but clear. She had learned it somewhere, probably at the reservation school before her people had fled. "My cabin, about 15 miles northwest of the settlement at Crooked Creek. The storm has made travel impossible. You were near the creek bed, unconscious in the snow." "Who are you?" "Nathan Grayson. This is my land." Her grip on the knife tightened. "White man's land, white man's cabin." There was bitterness in her voice, but also something else. Resignation, perhaps. Marcus chose that moment to wake up, rolling over in his bed and blinking sleepily. When he saw that the woman was awake, he sat up quickly. "She's alive," he said with genuine pleasure. "I'm Marcus. Mr. Grayson saved you." The woman's eyes shifted to the boy, and some of the naked fear in her expression softened slightly. Children were not threats. Her knife hand lowered a fraction, though she didn't put the weapon down. Nathan spoke firmly but gently to Marcus. "Get water from the kettle, not too hot." As Marcus hurried to obey, Nathan returned his attention to the woman. "You need to drink. You were severely dehydrated. The water will help." She didn't respond, just watched him with those dark, evaluative eyes. Nathan could see her mind working, processing, trying to understand the situation. White man finds Apache woman. White man brings her to cabin. What happens next in this story? Marcus brought the cup, but Nathan took it and set it on the small table beside the bed rather than trying to hand it to her directly. Less threatening that way. "Drink when you are ready," he said. They sat in tense silence for a long moment. Finally, the woman seemed to make a decision. She lowered the knife slightly, though she kept it in her hand, and reached for the cup with her other hand. The movement made her wince as damaged muscles protested. She drank in small, careful sips, as if her throat hurt. When she finished, she set the cup down and met Nathan's gaze directly. "What's on and why?" she asked. Just that single word, but it contained multiple questions. "Because you needed help," Nathan said simply. "I am Apache. I know. You are not afraid I bring trouble?" Nathan considered lying, but something in her directness demanded honesty. "Yes, I'm concerned about trouble. But that didn't seem like a good enough reason to let you die." She studied him for another long moment, then asked, "You have water. You have medicine things. You know how to treat cold sickness. You are soldier?" The question hit Nathan like a physical blow. He forced himself to hold her gaze. Was. Not anymore. Understanding dawned in her eyes, and with it came a hardness that made her suddenly look older, more worn. "Scout," she said. It wasn't a question. "You were Scout." Nathan felt his chest tighten. Of all the things she might have guessed, this was perhaps the worst. "Yes, 5 years ago I left." Her hand tightened on the knife again. "Why you leave?" "Because I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be part of what was happening." Marcus, sensing the tension but not understanding it, looked between them with growing confusion. "Mr. Grayson, what's wrong?" Nathan didn't take his eyes off the woman. "Marcus, could you check on the horses in the shed? Make sure they have feed and water." "But the storm, It's eased enough. Stay close to the rope line. Come right back. The boy nodded and pulled on his coat, glancing back once at the woman before heading outside. When the door closed, the cabin seemed to shrink, the space between Nathan and the woman becoming charged with unspoken history. She spoke in Apache now, rapid and harsh. Nathan understood enough of the language from his army days to catch the meaning, though not every word. She was asking him something about a place, a canyon, Blue Hawk Canyon. Nathan felt his blood run cold. You were there, he said, switching to the halting Apache he had learned. At Blue Hawk Canyon. My people were there, she said, still in Apache. My family. You came before the soldiers. You tracked us. You brought them to us. The weight of old guilt pressed down on Nathan's shoulders. He wanted to look away, to make excuses, to explain that he had been following orders. But all those justifications died in his throat because they were lies. He had made choices. He had been complicit. No amount of rationalization changed that. I remember, he said quietly. I'm sorry. Those words aren't enough. They'll never be enough. She switched back to English, perhaps so she could be more precise in what she wanted to say. Sorry, my uncle died because of you. He tried to fight. They shot him. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. I know. I can't undo what I did. Why you help me now? Guilt? He opened his eyes and looked at her directly. Partly, yes, but also because it's right. Because I have a boy watching me, learning from me, because I don't want to be that man anymore. They sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the shutters. The woman's breathing was still labored, and Nathan could see the pain in her face from her injuries and the lingering effects of hypothermia. Finally, she asked, What is your name again? Nathan Grayson. I am Ayanna. The formality of the introduction felt strange given everything that had been said, but also necessary. A reset of sorts. Ayanna, Nathan repeated. Can I check your injuries? The bruising on your shoulder looks severe. She tensed immediately, the knife coming up again. You not touch me. I won't, but I have salve that will help with the pain and reduce swelling. I can show you where it is and you can apply it yourself, or not. Your choice. The word choice seemed to catch her attention. She studied him again with that intense, evaluating gaze. Finally, she nodded slightly. Nathan moved slowly to his medical supplies and retrieved a small tin of salve he had made from herbs and animal fat. He placed it on the table beside the bed, well within her reach, but requiring him to come no closer. For bruises, he said. It works. I used it myself after I got thrown from a horse last month. Ayanna took the tin and opened it, sniffing the contents. Nathan saw surprise flicker across her face. This has cottonwood bark, she said, and sage. Apache medicine. Learned it from a healer near Fort Apache, before everything went bad. She looked at him with something that might have been respect. You learn good. Marcus returned then, stamping snow from his boots and shivering. Horses are fine. There's enough hay for 3 days at least. He looked at Ayanna hopefully. Are you feeling better, ma'am? The woman's expression softened when she looked at the boy. Yes. Better. Thank you. I'm glad Mr. Grayson found you. You would have died out there. I know. Marcus looked like he wanted to ask more questions, but Nathan caught his eye and shook his head slightly. The boy nodded and busied himself with preparing a simple breakfast of corn mush and dried meat. As the morning light grew stronger outside, Nathan found himself in an impossible situation. He had an Apache woman recovering in his cabin, a woman who knew what he had been, what he had done. The law said she was a fugitive if she had left the reservation without permission. Local prejudices said she was dangerous. And yet, looking at her sitting there with a knife clutched in one hand and pain etched in every line of her face, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not quite redemption. That was too strong a word for the situation. But perhaps the first small step on a very long path toward it. The storm continued outside, and Nathan knew they were all trapped together for at least another day, possibly more. 3 people in a small cabin, a former Army scout carrying the weight of his past, an Apache woman fleeing from something, and a boy who needed to believe that people could be good. What could possibly go wrong? The storm continued through the night and into the next day, relentless and unforgiving. Snow piled against the cabin walls in drifts that reached halfway up the shuttered windows. Inside, the three occupants settled into an uneasy coexistence, circling each other like wary animals forced to share den space during harsh weather. Nathan had given Ayanna the bed and moved his own sleeping area to a pallet near the fire. Marcus remained in his corner, but the boys' curious glances toward their unexpected guest never ceased. He was young enough to be fascinated rather than frightened, old enough to sense the tension that crackled between the two adults whenever their eyes met. By the second morning, Ayanna's condition had improved dramatically. The color had returned to her face, though the bruising on her shoulder had darkened to a deep purple that spread across her collarbone like spilled ink. She could sit up without assistance now, and the tremors that had racked her body during the first night had subsided completely. Nathan maintained a careful distance, respecting the invisible boundaries she had established. He spoke only when necessary, his words efficient and practical. Where the firewood was kept, how to work the pump for the well water that came up through a pipe he had installed in the cabin floor. The location of the outhouse, though he suspected she would not venture outside until absolutely necessary. It was Marcus who finally broke through the wall of silence. The boy had been studying Ayanna with open curiosity for hours, stealing glances while pretending to oil the steel traps that needed maintenance. Finally, his natural gregariousness overcame his hesitation. "Miss Ayanna," he said, looking up from his work, "how did you learn to speak English so well?" Nathan tensed, expecting her to rebuff the question. Instead, she looked at the boy with an expression that was almost gentle. "Mission school," she said. "When I was young, before my people left the reservation, teachers were kind. They taught reading, writing, speaking." "Can you read?" Marcus asked with genuine interest. "Yes. Can you?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Grayson's been teaching me. We have 3 books. I've read them all twice." "What books?" Marcus scrambled to retrieve them from the shelf, eager to share. "This one's about farming. This one's got Bible stories. And this one," he held up a worn leather volume with obvious pride, "this one's about Lewis and Clark exploring the West." Ayanna took the book carefully, running her fingers over the embossed cover. Something shifted in her expression, a momentary softening that made her look younger. "My father told me stories about the explorers, how they came through our lands long ago, before the soldiers, before everything changed." "What happened to your father?" Marcus asked with the blunt innocence of youth. Nathan started to intervene, to tell the boy that some questions were too personal, but Ayanna spoke first. "He died 3 years ago. Sickness at the reservation. Many people died that winter. Not enough food, not enough medicine. The agent kept what we needed and sold it in town for profit." The matter-of-fact way she delivered this information was somehow more devastating than if she had spoken with anger or grief. These were simply facts of her existence. People died. Systems failed. Life continued for those who survived. Marcus looked stricken. "That's terrible." "Yes," Ayanna agreed. "It was terrible." Nathan, who had been mixing cornmeal for Johnny cakes, found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "The corruption at the reservations was one of the reasons I left the army. I reported what I saw. They didn't care. Said it was an internal matter for the Bureau of Indian Affairs." Ayanna's eyes snapped to him, sharp and evaluating. "So you knew. You knew what was happening, and you still tracked my people when they tried to leave." "Yes." Nathan forced himself to meet her gaze. "I knew, and I did it anyway. Until I didn't." "What changed?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. The only sounds in the cabin were the crackle of the fire and the muffled howl of wind outside. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "Blue Hawk Canyon changed me. Watching families torn apart. Seeing a soldier strike a woman holding an infant. My sister was there. She looked at me like I was something rotten and broken. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. But I couldn't do it anymore." Marcus had stopped working on the traps, listening intently. This was more than Nathan had ever told him about his past. Ayanna studied Nathan's face for a long moment. "Your sister. Where is she now?" "Dead, 2 years ago. Fever took her while I was writing for a doctor. I got back too late. I'm sorry for your loss." The simple sincerity in her words caught Nathan off guard. After everything, after what he had been, she could still offer genuine condolence. It made the weight in his chest feel somehow heavier and lighter at the same time. "Thank you," he managed. The conversation lulled, but something had shifted. The atmosphere in the cabin was still tense, still careful, but the sharp edges had softened slightly. They were no longer quite strangers, though they were not yet anything that could be called friends. Over the next few hours, a tentative routine established itself. Nathan showed Marcus how to properly clean and maintain the Winchester rifle, explaining the mechanics with the patience of someone who understood that knowledge could mean survival. Ayanna watched from the bed, and once, when Nathan was struggling to describe how the firing pin mechanism worked, she spoke up. "Like a hammer striking a nail," she said, "but the nail is the bullet primer. The hammer must hit straight and hard, or the bullet does not fire." Nathan looked at her in surprise. "That's exactly right. How did you know that?" "My father taught me. He learned from a trapper who spent a winter with our band. The trapper was missing 3 fingers on his left hand from a gun that misfired. He said understanding the weapon was the only way to respect its danger." "Your father was a wise man." "Yes, he was." From there, an exchange began. Nathan would explain something about survival in the Wyoming winter, and Ayanna would add her own knowledge, often from a different perspective. How to read weather signs, how to find water under snow, which plants could be eaten and which would kill. Marcus absorbed it all like a sponge, asking questions that prompted both adults to explain further. The boy had unknowingly become a bridge between them, a reason to communicate that felt safer than direct conversation about the harder topics that hung between them. By midday, Ayanna was strong enough to stand and walk around the cabin, though she moved slowly and kept one hand pressed to her bruised shoulder. Nathan had laid out one of his sister's old dresses, smaller and more appropriate than the torn deerskin she had been wearing. But Ayanna had looked at it and shaken her head. "I will repair my own dress," she said firmly. "Do you have needle and sinew?" Nathan found the supplies in Sarah's old sewing kit. He handed them to Ayanna and watched as she set to work with practiced efficiency. Her stitches were small and precise, each one placed with the care of someone who had learned young that well-maintained clothing could mean the difference between comfort and misery in harsh conditions. "You're skilled," Nathan observed. "My mother taught me. She could sew anything. Clothing, moccasins, ceremonial garments. Her stitches were so fine they looked like the dress was made from one piece of leather." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." Ayanna paused in her work, her hands stilling. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. She died last year, after my father. The sickness took her slowly. She made me promise before she died that I would not let grief make me weak, that I would survive no matter what. You honored her promise. You're here. Yes, but barely. She returned to her stitching, but Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened as if she were holding back words. Marcus, who had been conspicuously quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Ayanna, if you don't mind me asking, why were you out in the storm? Mr. Grayson says nobody travels in weather like that unless they're running from something terrible." Nathan shot the boy a warning look, but Ayanna's expression remained neutral. She tied off a stitch and bit the sinew to cut it before answering. "I was running from something terrible," she said simply. "My people, what was left of us, we had left the reservation. Too much sickness, not enough food. We tried to live the old way, moving with the seasons, hunting, gathering. But we were only 20 people, mostly women and children and elders. The agent at the reservation, a man named Coulter, he did not want us to leave. Made him look bad that we chose cold and hunger over his protection." She paused, her hand stilling on the dress. "3 days before Mr. Grayson found me, we were camped near a creek. Dawn came, so did Ute warriors, 5 of them." Nathan felt his stomach tighten. He knew what was coming, but he let her tell it in her own way. "The Utes and my people, we have old conflicts, old grudges. But this was not about old grudges. The warriors had been paid to find us and bring us back to Agent Coulter, paid in money and supplies." Marcus looked confused. "But why would Utes help a white agent?" Ayana's smile was bitter. Because the reservations have made everyone desperate. The Utes on their reservation are starving too. $50 for bringing back runaways is more money than most families see in a year. Enough to buy medicine, food, blankets for winter. Nathan set down the pan he had been cleaning. Coulter was paying bounties for runaways? Yes, legal, he said. Legal, we were fugitives from federal land. He had the right to reclaim us. She returned to her stitching, but her movements were more aggressive now, each pull of the sinew sharper. They killed the men who tried to fight, took the women and children. 3 of us escaped into the trees. 2 were caught. I kept running. 1 warrior caught me. He tore my dress, struck me, said I would fetch a good price because I was young and strong. Her voice never wavered, but Nathan saw her hands tremble slightly. I had a knife hidden in my belt, small blade. I cut him across the arm when he tried to tie my wrists. Not deep, but enough that he let go. I plowed into the storm. I chose freezing to death over being sold back to Coulter like livestock. The cabin fell silent except for the endless whisper of wind and snow outside. Marcus looked horrified. Nathan felt a familiar rage building in his chest, the same anger that had ultimately driven him from the army. The system was broken, people suffered, and those in power profited. This Agent Coulter, Nathan said carefully, he's still operating the same way. As far as I know, unless someone stops him. How would someone stop him? Ayana looked up, meeting Nathan's eyes directly. Proof, records, someone with authority who actually cares. But who has that? The army does not care. The territorial government does not care. Indians are not citizens. We have no rights they are bound to respect. That is what your judges say. Yes? She was quoting the Dred Scott decision, though she probably did not know the specific case. The principle had been applied broadly and brutally. Nathan felt the weight of shame settle over him again. Before he could respond, a sound cut through the storm's monotony. The distant but distinct sound of a horse nickering. Nathan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Ayana's eyes went wide with fear. Someone is coming, she whispered. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. I see a rider, 1 man. He's heading straight for the cabin. Nathan's mind raced through possibilities. A neighbor would have called out by now. A casual traveler would not be out in this weather. That left official business or trouble, and in his experience, those were often the same thing. Ayana, get in the back room, he said quietly but firmly. Stay quiet. Marcus, act natural. Ayana moved quickly despite her injuries, disappearing through the doorway that led to the cabin's smaller second room. Nathan positioned himself near the door, rifle held low but ready. He forced his breathing to slow, his mind to calm. Whatever was coming, panic would not help. The knock, when it came, was loud and authoritative. A lawman's knock. Grayson, Nathan Grayson, open up, Territorial Marshal. Nathan glanced at Marcus, who had gone pale. He mouthed the words steady to the boy, then opened the door just wide enough to see out. A man stood on the porch, snow-covered and clearly miserable. He was perhaps 50 years old, with a weathered face and tired eyes. A badge glinted on his coat. Behind him, a horse stood with its head down against the wind. Marshal, Nathan said neutrally, hell of a day for a ride. Hell of a day for most things, the marshal agreed. His name was Tom Hewitt, and Nathan had met him once before years ago when there had been a property dispute with a neighbor. Hewitt had struck him as fair-minded, but by the book. Can I come in? About to lose feeling in my extremities. Nathan hesitated only a second before stepping back. Come in, coffee's hot. Hewitt entered, stamping snow from his boots. His eyes swept the cabin with professional efficiency, noting the extra dishes on the table, the damp clothing hung to dry by the fire. Nathan saw the exact moment when the marshal registered that the clothing included a woman's doeskin dress. Nice place you got here, Hewitt said carefully. Warm. Does the job. What brings you out in weather like this? Hewitt accepted the cup of coffee Marcus offered him and took a long drink before answering. Got a complaint filed 3 days ago. Man named Jacob Brennan. Know him? Nathan's jaw tightened. I know him. owns the property to the east. Been trying to buy my land for 2 years. I keep telling him no. Well, Brennan's claiming you're harboring a fugitive. An Apache woman who escaped from a Ute raiding party says it's a violation of territorial law, and if you're breaking the law on your claim, your land title becomes void. There it was, the threat laid bare. Nathan forced himself to remain calm, to think clearly. And you rode out in a blizzard on Brennan's word alone? I did, because he filed the complaint with the territorial judge, and the judge takes federal law seriously. If there's a reservation Indian on your property without authorization, I'm required to investigate. Hewitt's eyes moved to the dress again. That looked like Apache work to you, Grayson? Nathan could lie, should lie, but he had never been good at deception, and he suspected Hewitt would see through it anyway. Before he could answer, a voice came from the doorway to the back room. Yes, Marshal, it is Apache work, because I am Apache. Ayanna stepped into view. She had wrapped a blanket around her shoulders over the repaired dress, and despite her obvious injuries, she held herself with quiet dignity. Nathan's heart sank. She had just made everything infinitely more complicated. Hewitt set down his coffee and stood. Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you some questions. I will answer them, Ayanna said. She moved to stand beside Nathan, and he was struck by the deliberateness of the gesture. She was not hiding, not cowering. She was choosing to face this directly. What's your name? Ayanna. I have no family name. My people do not use them. Were you part of a group that left the San Carlos Reservation without authorization approximately 6 weeks ago? I left because the reservation was killing my people. Slow starvation is still murder, Marshal. Hewitt's expression flickered. Sympathy, perhaps, but he pressed on. That doesn't change the legal status. By law, you're considered a fugitive. I'm supposed to return you to federal custody. Nathan stepped forward. She was attacked, Marshal, by Utes working for a corrupt agent named Coulter, who's been paying bounties for runaways. She was beaten, left for dead. I found her dying in the snow. Are you telling me I should have left her there? I'm telling you the law's the law, Grayson. I don't write it. I just enforce it. Even when the law's wrong? Hewitt was quiet for a moment. Especially then. Because if men like me start picking and choosing which laws to enforce based on what feels right, we've got chaos. It was a fair point. Nathan hated it, but it was fair. He was scrambling for another argument when he heard the sound of another horse approaching. Then another. He moved to the window and felt his blood run cold. Jacob Brennan sat astride a large roan, looking pleased with himself. Behind him were 4 Ute warriors, and Nathan recognized the lead man immediately from old Army intelligence briefings. Blackhawk, son of the chief, known for being both an exceptional fighter and an honorable man who kept his word. Brennan dismounted and strode toward the cabin like he owned it. Marshal Hewitt, good, you beat me here. I brought additional witnesses. These Ute warriors are the ones who were pursuing the fugitive. They can confirm she's the woman who killed one of their men during her escape. Nathan's head snapped toward Ayanna. You killed someone. Her face was pale but determined. He was going to tie me to his horse and drag me back. I had no choice. Brennan pushed open the door without knocking, tracking snow across the floor. He looked at Ayanna with undisguised satisfaction. There she is, boys. That the woman? Blackhawk had entered behind Brennan along with 2 of his warriors. The other 2 remained outside. The Ute warrior studied Ayanna carefully, then spoke in clear English. That is the woman. She killed Running Elk 3 days ago, cut his throat while he slept. Ayanna's eyes blazed. Liar! He was not sleeping. He was trying to force himself on me. I defended myself. Blackhawk's expression remained neutral, but Nathan, who had years of experience reading men in tense situations, saw something flicker in the warrior's eyes. Discomfort, maybe, or doubt. Hewitt raised his hands. Everyone calm down. This is getting complicated fast. Miss Ayanna, did you kill a man? I defended myself from rape. If that is murder in your law, then I am guilty. The marshal looked pained. Ma'am, that's a serious accusation against a dead man who can't defend himself. He was not a good man, Blackhawk said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. Running Elk had a reputation, cruel to women, But he was my cousin. His death must be answered for. Brennan was practically vibrating with glee. So we've got murder in addition to the fugitive charge. Marshal, I believe that makes this a clear case. Remove her from Grayson's property, and his land claim becomes contestable due to his harboring a known criminal. Nathan's mind was working frantically. There had to be a way out of this. Some legal technicality, some loophole. And then he remembered something Samuel Whitmore had told him once, years ago, about territorial law and marriage. She's not a fugitive, Nathan heard himself say. She's my wife. The cabin erupted. Brennan shouted protests. Marcus gasped. Hewitt's eyebrows shot up. Ayanna turned to stare at Nathan with an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. Nathan continued before anyone could interrupt. We were married yesterday, by Apache custom. That makes her part of my household under my protection and authority. She's not a fugitive. She's my wife. Hewitt looked skeptical. Apache marriage isn't recognized by territorial law, Grayson. But common law marriage is, Nathan countered, praying his memory of the conversation with Samuel was accurate. If I testify that she's been living under my roof as my wife for, say, 6 months, that establishes a common law marriage that the territory has to recognize. That's a lie, Brennan sputtered. She just got here. The tracks in the snow prove it. Nathan gestured toward the window where snow continued to fall in thick sheets. What tracks? Storm's been going for 3 days. Covered everything. There's no evidence about when she arrived. Just my word that she's been here for months. Hewitt rubbed his face with both hands. Grayson, you're asking me to accept a very convenient story. I'm asking you to follow the letter of the law, Marshal. Same as you asked me to do. Show me the evidence that contradicts my statement. Blackhawk had been listening carefully. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. If the woman is married, our claim on her changes. Among my people, a married woman belongs to her husband's family. To take her would be to insult his honor and that of his kin. We do not do this. Brennan whirled on him. I'm paying you $50 to bring her back. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Blackhawk's eyes went cold. You did not tell me she was married. You said she was a runaway slave with no family. You lied, white man. She's not actually married. This is obviously a ploy. Well, Blackhawk looked at Ayanna directly. Did you agree to be this man's wife? Ayanna hesitated only a moment. Nathan could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid weighing of choices. Then she moved closer to Nathan and spoke clearly. Yes, I am his wife by choice and custom. Blackhawk nodded slowly. Then the matter is settled. We have no claim. He turned to Brennan. You lied to me. You brought dishonor to my actions. I will not work with you again. To Hewitt, he said, Marshal, I withdraw our complaint. The woman killed Running Elk in self-defense. This we suspected but could not prove. Her marriage confirms she acted to protect her honor. We have no quarrel with Nathan Grayson or his wife. Brennan's face was turning purple with rage. You can't just walk away. I paid you. Keep your money. I do not want payment gained through deception. Blackhawk looked at Nathan one last time. Grayson, your sister Sarah once gave my wife medicine when she was sick. 3 winters ago, near the reservation border. My wife would have died without that medicine. I knew when I saw your eyes that you were her brother. This is why I gave you 3 days before coming, to honor the debt to Sarah. Nathan felt the world tilt slightly. Sarah had saved Blackhawk's wife. This warrior had known all along and had been trying to give Nathan a chance to prepare. I didn't know, Nathan said quietly. Thank you for telling me. Your sister was a good woman. You honor her memory by your actions today. Blackhawk turned and left, his warriors following. The cabin felt suddenly much less crowded. Brennan was sputtering, trying to salvage something from the situation. Marshal, you can't accept this obvious fabrication. They just met. There's no marriage. Hewitt looked tired. He studied Nathan and Ayanna for a long moment, then shook his head. Mr. Brennan, I've got no evidence to contradict Mr. Grayson's statement. The storm covered any tracks. The Utes have withdrawn their complaint. Without a complaint, and I've got no cause to remove anyone from this property. He picked up his hat. As far as I'm concerned, This is a domestic matter, outside my jurisdiction. This is outrageous. I'll file an appeal with the territorial judge. You do that, but I wouldn't count on success. Judges don't like having their time wasted with property disputes dressed up as criminal matters. Hewitt nodded to Nathan. Good day to you and your wife, Mr. Grayson. After the marshal and Brennan left, the cabin fell into stunned silence. Marcus was the first to speak. Are you really married? Nathan and Ayanna looked at each other. They had not discussed this, had not planned it. Nathan had acted on instinct, grabbing for any solution that would keep her safe. But now the words hung between them, impossible to take back. Legally, yes, Nathan said slowly. By my testimony and her confirmation, the territory will recognize it. And in truth? Ayanna asked quietly. Nathan met her eyes. In truth, I don't know, but I meant what I said. You're under my protection. No one will take you from here. Not Brennan, not the marshal, not anyone. She studied his face for a long time. You did not have to do that. You could have let them take me. No, I couldn't. It was the same question she had asked when she first woke. Why save her? Why help her? Why risk everything for a stranger? Nathan still did not have a good answer. Or maybe he had too many answers, all of them tangled together in a knot he could not quite unravel. Because it was right, he said finally, and because I'm tired of doing things that are wrong just because they're legal or expected or easier. Ayanna nodded slowly. She looked at Marcus, who was watching them both with wide eyes, then back to Nathan. Then I accept. I am Ayanna Grayson, your wife, and this is my home. The words should have felt strange, false. They had known each other less than 2 full days, but somehow in the warm cabin with snow falling outside, and a boy watching them hopefully, they felt almost right, as if some pattern had been set in motion that they were only now beginning to understand. Welcome home, Nathan said softly, and for the first time since she had arrived, Ayanna smiled. The storm finally broke on the 4th day, leaving behind a world transformed into something crystalline and strange. Snow lay in drifts that reached the eaves in some places, sculpted by wind into shapes that looked almost deliberate. The sky cleared to a blue so sharp it hurt to look at directly, and the temperature dropped even further as the cloud cover disappeared. The days since the marshal's visit had passed quietly. Nathan and Ayanna moved carefully around their new reality as husband and wife, testing what that meant. Marcus watched them with hopeful eyes, wanting this fragile family to work. Nathan stood on the porch at dawn, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, surveying the work that needed to be done. The path to the shed would need clearing. The animals required tending. And most importantly, he needed to assess their situation with clear eyes now that the immediate crisis had passed. He had a wife. The thought still felt surreal. A woman he barely knew, connected to the worst parts of his past, now legally bound to him by words spoken in desperation. And yet, when he glanced back through the cabin window and saw Ayanna helping Marcus prepare breakfast, something in his chest loosened slightly. She moved with growing confidence, the stiffness from her injuries easing day by day. Her laughter at something Marcus said carried through the door, light and unexpected. The sound made Nathan realize how silent his life had become. For 2 years after Sarah's death, the cabin had held only the sounds of necessity, footsteps, the scrape of a chair, the crack of firewood splitting. Now there was conversation, questions, the natural chaos of people learning to exist together. He heard the door open behind him and turned to find Ayanna stepping out, wrapped in one of Sarah's old wool shawls. She had braided her hair, and the bruising on her face had faded from purple to a yellowish green that spoke of healing. You should be inside, Nathan said. Still too cold out here. I have been inside for days. I need to see the sky. She moved to stand beside him, her eyes scanning the transformed landscape. Beautiful. Deadly, but beautiful. That's the frontier. Everything that can kill you looks peaceful first. She smiled slightly at that. Like people, yes? Nathan glanced at her. Some people. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Ayanna spoke again, her voice quieter. I have been thinking about what happened, about what you said to the marshal, about us being married. Yes, you did not ask me first. You decided for me. Nathan felt a flush of shame. You're right. I should have found another way. I can tell the marshal it was a mistake if you want. Face whatever consequences come. That is not what I said. Ayanna turned to face him fully. I said you did not ask. I did not say I was unhappy with your choice. You're not? No, you gave me a choice when you could have given me nothing. You risked your land, your safety, your future for me, a stranger, an enemy. You were never my enemy. I was Apache, you were a scout. We were enemies even if we never met. Nathan could not argue with that truth. What are you saying, Ayanna? She pulled the shawl tighter and looked out at the snow-covered ridge. I am saying that marriage of necessity can become marriage of choice, if both people are willing. Are you willing? The question hung in the cold air between them. Nathan thought about the easy answer, the one that would complicate nothing. He could say they should maintain appearances for the law but keep emotional distance, protect themselves from further entanglement. But he found he did not want the easy answer. Yes, he said simply, I'm willing. Then we have an agreement. We are married. Not just in the marshal's records, but in truth, we will see where this path leads. She extended her hand, not in the way white couples sealed such promises, but palm up, offering. Nathan understood the gesture from his army days. It was how the Apaches sealed agreements of honor. He placed his palm over hers, feeling the warmth of her skin even in the freezing air. Agreed, he said. From inside, Marcus called out, Are you two going to stand out there until you freeze? Or are you going to come eat? I made Johnny cakes and they're actually good this time. Ayanna laughed, the sound carrying across the snow. We should go in. Your son has worked hard. Our son, Nathan corrected gently. If we're doing this, we're doing it completely. Marcus needs a mother. You need a family. We all need each other. Something shifted in Ayanna's expression. Her eyes grew bright, though whether from cold or emotion, Nathan could not tell. Our son, she repeated softly. Yes, I would like that very much. They went inside together, and if their hands brushed as they passed through the doorway, neither mentioned it. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Nathan taught Marcus and Ayanna the intricacies of winter survival, information delivered with the precision of someone who understood that knowledge meant life in this harsh land. How to read the depth of snow to judge how long before travel became possible again. How to ration supplies when you did not know how long you would need them. How to maintain tools and weapons so they would function reliably when needed. Ayanna contributed her own expertise, teaching them both Apache techniques that Nathan had never learned, despite his time tracking her people. She showed Marcus how to weave snares from plant fibers that were nearly invisible against snow. How to identify animal tracks, not just by shape, but by the tiny details that told you if the creature was healthy, injured, hunting, or fleeing. See here, she said, crouched beside a set of rabbit tracks near the cabin. Marcus knelt beside her, his attention absolute. The prints are deep on the front paws, shallow on the back. This rabbit is favoring its rear legs. Injured, maybe, or sick. This is the rabbit you want to trap because it will be slower, easier to catch. But if it's sick, won't the meat be bad? Smart question. Look at the droppings. She pointed to small pellets in the snow. Round, solid, dark, healthy droppings. The rabbit is injured, not sick. The meat will be good. Nathan watched from the porch, mending a harness that had cracked in the cold. He found himself studying Ayanna as she taught, noting the way she moved with growing confidence, how the wariness in her eyes had begun to ease. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow in question. He shook his head, returning his attention to the leather, but a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. That evening, after Marcus had gone to bed, Nathan and Ayanna sat by the fire. He had been working on a new trap mechanism, and she had been carefully beating a strip of leather, her fingers moving with practiced precision. May I ask you something? Ayanna said without looking up from her work. Of course. The coat hanging by the door, the small one. It has been there since I arrived, but you never speak of it. Nathan's hands stilled on the trap. He had known this question would come eventually. It was my sister's, Sarah. I haven't been able to bring myself to put it away. Tell me about her. So Nathan did. He told Ayanna about Sarah, 6 years his junior, who had followed him west because she believed he could be better than his past suggested. How she had worked alongside him to build the cabin, her hands blistering from unfamiliar labor, but never complaining. How she had befriended everyone she met, seeing the best in people even when they showed her their worst. She was at Blue Hawk Canyon, Nathan said quietly, part of a missionary group. She tried to help the families, gave them food, water, bandages. After that day, she told me she was ashamed of me. Those words cut deeper than any bullet could have. But you left the army after that. Yes, because she was right to be ashamed. I was ashamed of myself. Ayanna set down her beating. Nathan, I must tell you something about that day at Blue Hawk Canyon. There was something in her tone that made Nathan look up sharply. My mother was there, she continued. I was not yet born, but she told me the story many times before she died. She said a white woman with yellow hair came to her when she was sitting in the dirt crying. My mother was holding my older sister, who was just an infant then. A soldier had tried to take the baby from her arms. He struck her when she would not let go. Nathan felt his throat tighten. He remembered that moment with brutal clarity. It was seared into his memory like a brand. The woman wrapped my mother's head wound, Ayanna said. She gave her water, and she gave her this. Ayanna reached into her dress and pulled out the turquoise necklace Nathan had noticed before. My mother said the woman's name was Sarah. She said Sarah had kind eyes and a brother who was a soldier, but might be a good man underneath. Nathan stared at the necklace. He recognized it. Sarah had worn it every day. He thought it had been buried with her, but she must have given it away before that final illness took hold. My mother told me, Ayanna continued, her voice thick with emotion, that she watched you after Sarah helped her. She saw you turn away when your officer ordered you to track families into the mountains. She saw you walk away from everything. She said, that soldier chose honor over orders. His sister would be proud. Your mother, Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. She was the woman with the infant, the one who was struck. Yes, and that infant was my sister. She died 3 years later from the reservation sickness. My mother was pregnant with me at the time of Blue Hawk Canyon. She used to say I was born from her tears and Sarah's kindness. The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. The woman Nathan had failed to protect 25 years ago had been Ayanna's mother. And Sarah, in her quiet way, had tried to make amends for what Nathan and the army had done. The spirits brought me to you, Ayanna said softly. My mother used to say that the spirits guide us to where we need to be, even when the path is hard. I did not understand until now. You could not save my mother and sister that day, but Sarah helped them when no one else would. And now you saved me. Sarah's kindness has come full circle. Nathan could not speak. The weight of it all, the impossible web of connections and consequences that had led to this moment, threatened to overwhelm him. He felt Ayanna's hand on his arm, warm and steady. Nathan, look at me. He did. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her expression was open, without anger or accusation. You are not the man you were. The man who found me in the snow is not the man who led soldiers to Blue Hawk Canyon. People can change. You have changed. Sarah knew this, my mother knew this, and I know this. How can you forgive me? The words came out rough, scraped raw. After everything? Because holding on to hate would dishonor my mother's memory. She forgave you the day she watched you walk away from the army. She told me that forgiveness is not about excusing what was done. It is about refusing to let the past poison the present. Ayanna squeezed his arm gently. And because you are my husband now, we cannot build a future if we are trapped in the past. Nathan pulled her to him then, not in passion, but in desperate gratitude. She came willingly, wrapping her arms around him, and they held each other while the fire crackled and the night deepened outside. When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were wet. Thank you, Nathan managed. You have nothing to thank me for. We saved each other. That is what family does. The word family settled over them like a benediction. They sat together in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Warmer, fuller, the kind of silence that exists between people who no longer need words to understand each other. The peace lasted 3 more days. Then Samuel Whitmore arrived. Nathan heard the horse before he saw it, and he was at the door with his rifle before Samuel even dismounted. The old trader raised both hands in a placating gesture. "Easy there, Nathan. Just me. Brought supplies and news, neither of which you're going to like." Samuel was in his late 50s, weathered and lean, with gray shot through his beard and eyes that missed nothing. He had been a soldier himself once, though he never spoke of those days. He and Nathan had developed a cautious friendship over the years, built on mutual respect and an understanding that some questions were better left unasked. Nathan lowered the rifle and stepped aside. "Come in, coffee's on." Samuel entered, stomping snow from his boots. His eyes immediately found Ayanna, who had moved to stand protectively near Marcus. To his credit, Samuel's expression did not change beyond a slight raising of his eyebrows. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat brim. "This is my wife, Ayanna," Nathan said, watching Samuel's face carefully. "Ayanna, this is Samuel Whitmore. He runs the trading post at Crooked Creek." "Your wife." Samuel's tone was carefully neutral. "Heard rumors in town. Didn't quite believe them. Congratulations are in order, I suppose." "Depends on the news you brought in," Nathan said. "You said I wouldn't like it." Samuel accepted a cup of coffee from Marcus and took a long drink before answering. "Jacob Brennan's been busy. He's filed an appeal with the territorial judge, like he threatened. But that's not the worst of it. Word got out about what happened here. About the Utes, about the Apache woman, about the marriage. And an Agent Coulter at the reservation heard about it. He's not happy. Apparently he had plans for your wife here. Was going to use her as an example. Public punishment for running. Now she's legally untouchable as a married woman, and he looks weak." Ayanna's face had gone pale. "What kind of plans?" Samuel's expression was grim. "The kind that involve making sure no one else gets the idea that leaving the reservation is a good option. From what I hear, Coulter's got a mean streak and a penchant for creative cruelty." "He cannot touch me now," Ayanna said, but her voice wavered slightly. "The law protects me." "The law's a funny thing out here," Samuel said. "Sometimes it protects. Sometimes it's just words on paper. Coulter's got connections, and he's got money to hire people who don't care much about what the law says." Nathan felt cold settle into his bones, and it had nothing to do with the winter air. "You're saying he might send someone after her anyway." "I'm saying it's a possibility you should prepare for. Coulter's not a man who takes public embarrassment well. And there's more. Black Hawk and his warriors. They've made camp about 5 miles south of here. They haven't left the area." Black Hawk withdrew his complaint. He said the matter was settled. "It is settled far as he's concerned, but 2 days ago, 3 more Ute warriors showed up at his camp. Word is they were sent by Coulter with a new offer. Double the original bounty, $100 for your wife, delivered back to the reservation." Marcus had been listening with growing alarm. "Would Black Hawk accept?" Samuel shrugged. "Black Hawk's an honorable man, but he's also got a family to feed and a sick wife who needs expensive medicine. $100 is more money than most people out here see in 5 years. That kind of temptation can make even good men do questionable things." Nathan was already moving, pulling down his rifle and checking the loads. "How long do we have?" "If they're coming, could be tonight, could be a week. Coulter's smart. He'll wait for the right moment, when you're vulnerable. Then we make sure we're never vulnerable." Nathan turned to Ayanna and Marcus. "We need to prepare, really prepare. This cabin needs to become a fortress." Over the next hours, Nathan transformed from the quiet rancher who preferred solitude into something else. The soldier he had been emerged, tactical and efficient. He directed Samuel and Marcus in fortifying the cabin while Ayanna prepared supplies and weapons. They reinforced the shutters with extra boards. Nathan showed them how to create firing ports, small holes that allowed someone inside to shoot out while remaining protected. They filled barrels with water in case of fire, moved ammunition to easily accessible locations throughout the cabin. "This door is the weak point," Nathan said, studying the heavy planks. "If they come, they'll try to breach it first." Samuel helped him drag a heavy oak table into position. "We can barricade it from inside, but if they're determined, they'll get through eventually. Then we need a backup plan." Nathan led them to the corner of the main room and pulled up a rug, revealing a trap door. "Cellar," went on. "Leads to a tunnel I dug when I first built this place. Comes out about 50 yards into the trees, in case of fire or siege. Marcus's eyes went wide. You built an escape tunnel and never told me? Didn't seem necessary before. It's necessary now. Nathan had Ayanna and Marcus practice the route until they could navigate it in darkness. The tunnel was narrow and rough, more of a crawl space than a proper passage. But it led to freedom. That was what mattered. As the sun began to set, Samuel prepared to leave. I'll ride to the territorial marshal. Let him know what's happening. If I can convince him it's urgent, I'll bring him back with me. Don't count on it, but I'll try. Hewitt's 2 days away, and that's in good weather, Nathan said. We're on our own. Then watch your backs. And Nathan, Samuel gripped his shoulder. What you're doing, protecting her, taking this stand, it's the right thing. Your sister would be proud. After Samuel left, Nathan gathered Ayanna and Marcus. I need to teach you both how to shoot. Properly, not just target practice. Combat shooting. They spent the remaining daylight hours training. Nathan was a patient but demanding teacher, correcting stance, breathing, trigger control. Marcus had handled rifles before, but never with this level of intensity. Ayanna proved to be a natural shot, her hands steady and her eyes sharp. You've done this before, Nathan observed after she hit 3 targets in succession. My father taught me, with bow and with rifle. He said a woman must be able to protect herself because men will not always be there to do it. Your father was right. As darkness fell, they ate a quiet meal. Marcus was subdued, the weight of their situation finally settling on him. Ayanna prepared a stew from dried meat and vegetables, moving around the kitchen area with increasing familiarity. Nathan found himself watching her, marveling at how quickly this space had changed from his lonely retreat into something that felt like a home. After Marcus went to bed, though Nathan suspected the boy would not sleep much, Nathan and Ayanna sat together by the fire. He was cleaning his revolver with methodical care. She was checking arrows, testing the tension of bowstrings. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Nathan considered the question honestly. Yes, but not for myself, for you and Marcus. If something happens to me, I need to know you'll both survive. Nothing will happen to you, Marty. You can't promise that? No, but I can promise that if they come, they will face all of us, not just you. We are family. We fight together. Nathan looked at her across the firelight. Her face was set with determination, but he could see the fear beneath it. Fear not for herself, he realized, but for him and Marcus. They had become her family too, this makeshift unit of survivors and misfits. Ayanna, if I don't make it through whatever's coming, I need you to know something. Nathan, do not speak like this. Listen, please. He set down the revolver and took her hands in his. These past days with you here, they've been the first time since Sarah died that I've felt like I was living instead of just existing. You brought light back into this place, into me. I know we barely know each other. I know this marriage started as a legal convenience, but it's become something real for me. You're real for me, and I'm grateful for that, whatever happens next. Ayanna's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You are real for me too. When I thought I would die in the snow, I had made peace with it. But then you found me. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, a family, a future. I will not lose that. I will not lose you. They leaned together then, their foreheads touching, breathing the same air. It was not quite a kiss, but something more intimate, a promise made without words. The attack came 3 nights later, just before dawn. Nathan woke to the sound of horses, plural, multiple riders approaching fast. He was out of bed and armed in seconds, his body moving on pure instinct honed by years of military service. Ayanna, Marcus, up now! They emerged from their sleeping areas, already partially dressed. Nathan had insisted they sleep in their clothes, ready for exactly this moment. Marcus grabbed his rifle with shaking hands. Ayanna had her bow and a quiver of arrows. Positions, Nathan commanded. Marcus, Seller, you're our insurance. If we fall, you run. No, I can help. You will help by surviving. That's an order, son. Go. Marcus's face crumpled, but he obeyed, disappearing through the trapdoor. Nathan and Ayanna moved to opposite windows, weapons ready. Nathan counted at least 5 riders, possibly more. They circled the cabin once, staying out of rifle range, assessing. Then a voice called out, accented and harsh. Nathan Grayson, send out the Apache woman. Do this and we leave peaceful. Nathan recognized the voice. Not Blackhawk, but one of the new warriors Samuel had mentioned. One of Coulter's hired men. She's my wife, Nathan shouted back. Protected by law. Leave now and there won't be trouble. Law does not reach here, white man. Only power. Send her out or we burn you out. Nathan looked at Ayanna. Her face was pale but set with determination. She met his eyes and shook her head firmly. Not surrendering, not going back. Your answer's no, Nathan called. Leave while you can. The response was immediate. Flaming arrows arced through the pre-dawn darkness, slamming into the cabin walls and roof. Nathan had prepared for this, soaking the wood with water, but fire was always a threat. Already, smoke was beginning to seep through gaps in the walls. They are trying to smoke us out, Ayanna said, her voice steady despite the fear Nathan could see in her eyes. Then we make them regret it. Nathan aimed carefully and fired. The lead rider jerked but didn't fall. Hit in the shoulder, not fatal. Good. Nathan didn't want to kill if he could avoid it, but he would if necessary. The warriors scattered, returning fire. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls. One shattered the shutter near Nathan's head, spraying him with splinters. He ignored the pain and kept firing, making each shot count. Ayanna's bow sang, arrow after arrow whispering through the air. She was aiming for horses, not men, forcing the riders to dismount and approach on foot. It was a sound strategy. Horses were bigger targets and harder to replace than warriors. The battle fell into a rhythm. Attack, return fire, reload. Attack again. The sky began to lighten, turning from black to gray. Nathan realized with growing concern that they were running low on ammunition. He had perhaps 20 rounds left for the rifle, maybe a dozen for the revolver. Then he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. Chopping. Someone was attacking the door with an axe. They're breaching, Nathan shouted. He moved toward the door just as the blade crashed through, splintering wood. Another strike. Another. The door would not hold much longer. Ayanna had abandoned the window and taken up a position where she could fire at whoever came through the door. Her face was set in lines of grim determination. This was the last stand. They both knew it. The door burst inward. A warrior charged through, and Nathan met him with the rifle butt, slamming it into the man's temple. The warrior went down hard. Another came through. Ayanna's arrow took him in the thigh. He fell back, screaming. Then everything happened at once. A shot rang out from outside, but not aimed at the cabin. Someone was firing at the attackers. Nathan risked a glance through the broken door and saw a sight he had not dared hope for. Samuel Whitmore had returned, and he had brought help. Marshal Hewitt rode beside him, along with 4 deputized men from the town. They had the attackers surrounded. Drop your weapons. Hewitt's voice carried clear authority. You're under arrest for attempted murder and arson. The remaining Ute warriors looked at each other. One made a move toward his rifle. Samuel shot it out of his hands. I wouldn't, Samuel said calmly. Next one goes through your head. The warriors surrendered, throwing down their weapons. Hewitt and his men moved in to bind them. Nathan lowered his rifle, his hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. Ayanna moved to his side, and he pulled her close, needing to feel that she was real and safe. Marcus emerged from the cellar, his face streaked with tears, but his eyes fierce. Is it over? It's over, Nathan said. He reached out and pulled the boy into the embrace with Ayanna. They stood there, the 3 of them, holding each other while the sun rose over the snow-covered ridge. Marshal Hewitt approached the cabin, stepping over the broken door. He looked at the damage, at Nathan and Ayanna holding each other, at Marcus with his rifle, and shook his head. Samuel got to me yesterday evening. Rode through the night to get here. Looks like we cut it close. Close enough, Nathan said. Thank you, Marshal. Don't thank me yet. This situation's bigger than I realized. One of those men out there started talking. Said they were hired by Agent Coulter. Gave us enough information that I can arrest Coulter for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder. The territorial judge is going to want statements from all of you. We'll give them. Hewitt's eyes moved to Ayanna. Ma'am, what those men tried to do to you, what Coulter's been doing at the reservation, it's going to come out. There'll be a federal investigation. Things are going to change. Will they? Ayana's voice was quiet but skeptical. Or will another corrupt agent replace him and the suffering continue? Hewitt could not answer that. None of them could. But something had shifted. A line had been crossed, and witnesses had survived to tell the tale. As the deputies led the prisoners away, and Samuel helped Nathan begin repairs on the damaged cabin, Ayana found herself standing on the porch, looking out at the endless, white landscape. Marcus came to stand beside her. "Ma," he said tentatively, testing out the word. She looked down at him and smiled, putting her arm around his shoulders. "Yes, my son? Are we safe now?" Ayana thought about lying, about giving him the comfort of false certainty, but this boy deserved truth. "We are safer, but safety is not permanent in this world. We must always be ready, always vigilant. That is how we protect what matters. Like you and Pa protected me today. Like we all protected each other. That is what family does." Nathan joined them on the porch, his shirt torn and his face smudged with soot and blood, but his eyes clear and steady. He put his arm around Ayana's waist, and she leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. "Samuel's staying to help with repairs," Nathan said. "Says it'll take a few days to get the door properly fixed and patch the bullet holes. Then we have a few days together," Ayana said, "as a family, without running, without fear. I will take that gift." "It's more than a gift," Nathan said quietly. "It's a beginning, a real one. We've fought for it, earned it, and we'll keep fighting for it every day if we have to." Ayana turned to face him fully. The sun was fully up now, turning the snow into fields of diamond light. In that clean, clear illumination, she could see everything that Nathan had been and everything he was becoming. A man who had made terrible choices but was making better ones now. A husband who had risked everything to protect her. A father who was teaching a boy how to be good. "Yes," she said, "we will fight for it. Together." She kissed him then, there on the porch with Marcus watching and grinning, with Samuel hammering boards and whistling, with the smoke from the fire damage still hanging in the air. It was not a kiss of passion or desperation. It was a kiss of commitment, of choice, of two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and decided to build something better. When they pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "Don't know when it happened, but I do." "I know," Ayana whispered back, "because I love you too, my husband, my Nathan." And in that moment, standing together on the threshold of a damaged cabin on a frozen Wyoming ridge, surrounded by the evidence of violence but alive and together, they were happy. The hard part was over. Now came the harder part, actually building a life together. But they would face that challenge the way they had faced everything else, as a family, together.